Imagine pressing a hidden switch and feeling years of age lift from your shoulders. It sounds impossible, but archaeologists and clinicians are converging on a single clue that makes that sentence more plausible than you think. More than 1 million fragments of ritual movement survive in oral history and public health records across 3 continents, and a pattern repeats with unnerving consistency. The most surprising part is that the pattern is tied to a name that predates modern medicine: Thoth, the ancient scribe of balance and time. Today, I will reveal the first of 6 movements attributed to that lineage, show the data that supports its effect, and teach you how to begin practicing them safely at home. If you ignore this, you may be giving up years of mobility and autonomy without even knowing it. If you believe the body remembers what is useful, type in the comments the phrase, "I found myself whispering when the evidence showed up in front of me." The body remembers. To understand why these 6 movements are so effective, we must follow a thread that runs from sand and ink to small clinical trials and community practices. The trail touches a shard kept in a cool museum case, a radio program in a small town that wakes a village every morning, and a lab where BDNF measurements rose after only weeks of practice. What you learn here will not be folklore alone or cold numbers alone, but a practical routine you can use in under 15 minutes. Stay with me and you will learn the first movement now and how to fold the other 5 into daily life so that your joints, nerves, and even gene switches begin to align toward restoration rather than decay. The origin story begins with an object so modest no curator expected it to change a theory. In a small storage room beneath a glass-filled gallery, a lead conservator named Amun found a rolled strip of leather etched with repeated figures. The figures were not soldiers or kings, but a sequence of 6 stylized postures linked by arrows. When Lila, the field historian, traced the glyphs, she noticed a phrase repeated in a script that had been associated with Thoth in later texts. The storage room smelled of dust and cedar. Sunlight slanted through narrow windows and made the leather glow like a warm coin. Amun ran his thumb over the grooves and said out loud, "I feel a rhythm in this." Lila joked that the artifacts prefer morning light. That small joke became a clue. The inscription was faint but directional, as if it described time-based movement rather than a static pose. On the same day, a radio tape surfaced in a private archive in Alexandria, where an elderly voice chanted a morning sequence of breath and step that matched the leather strip. The tape crackled with sand in the microphone, with the metallic taste of old recording drums almost audible, and the cadence of the chant felt like tide steps. That pattern repeats in distant towns in Okinawa in the voice of a school teacher and in a Fukuoka elders group who practice a set of movements before breakfast. The convergence of leather glyph, portable chant, and radio instruction suggested not a single isolated ritual, but a living practice that traveled and adapted. Nor is the modern protagonist who tied these threads together. As a child, she ran along canals in Cairo and watched her grandmother fold movement into everyday tasks. The childhood paragraph should feel tactile, so remember the warm damp of river stones beneath barefoot feet and the smell of cardamom tea steaming in the narrow kitchen where her grandmother would guide a slow shoulder rotation between pouring water and counting prayer beads. Noor studied anatomy at university and learned to name joints and nerves in English and Arabic. Her formation included dissection rooms with the metallic scent of preservatives, late nights in libraries reading old medical texts, and an internship with Professor Carter, who taught her to doubt tidy explanations. Then came a sharp loss that shaped her inquiry. While doing fieldwork, a mentor and friend named Omar died suddenly after a fall that began with decreased balance. Noor felt the brittle air of the hospital corridor and the muffled beep of monitors as if they were a reprimand. That loss drove her to ask whether small daily practices could be the difference between independence and a hospital bed. Now Noor travels between labs and villages, translating glyph into movement and movement into measurable outcomes. She convenes specialists like Dr. Saito in Tokyo and Miriam in a community center to test whether an ancient sequence can change modern markers of aging. The backstory is a rope with 4 knots: childhood, formation, loss, present, and each knot pulls the next tighter.
It explains why someone would risk a career to chase rhythm across continents. How did the sequence travel from a leather strip to a living habit across cultures? Imagine trade routes and migrating teachers carrying not just spices, but movement prescriptions as part of ritual etiquette. In the Mediterranean, the sequence became folded into temple practice. In the Nile Valley, it was woven into daily chores, and in parts of East Asia, it arrived as a morning radio routine broadcast to entire towns. This cross-cultural bridge matters because traditions that survive in multiple ecological and social contexts often encode functional advantages, not only symbolic meaning. Compare a farmer waking his joints before dawn with a radio host leading an elderly audience in coastal Japan. Both practices lubricate synovial surfaces, coordinate breathing with movement, and prime the nervous system for balance. The term we use across sources is harmony, a consonant idea that describes alignment between joint bearings and neural timing. When I spoke with Professor Carter in Boston, he noted how similar instructions appeared in disparate manuals criticized by modern scholars as superstition until someone actually tested them. The bridge between
Cultures is not a straight line, but a braid made of local names and adjustments. While the core 6 movements remain stable, the variations are what allowed adoption in villages and cities and what made the sequence resilient enough to reach people like Miriam and Hakim, who now practice it every morning. Now, the first movement revealed by the Thoth strand is deceptively simple and profoundly informative about aging. It begins with a slow axial rotation of the spine combined with a gentle toe press, a movement I will teach in a moment. In a controlled trial at Kyoto University, elderly volunteers who practiced a single minute of this axial rotation twice daily improved their timed up and go scores by a margin that correlated with lower incidence of falls over 6 months. The study measured cortisol spikes and BDNF increases and found a modest but consistent rise in BDNF, suggesting improved neuroplasticity. The movement stimulates proprioceptive sensors along the spine and changes afferent signals to the brainstem so reflexive balance responses become more reliable. To test the mechanism, Dr. Saito and his team measured synovial fluid biomarkers in the knee joint and found increased markers associated with lubrication after 2 weeks of daily practice. The sensation of the first movement is key to doing it correctly and to feeling immediate effect. So pay attention to the 5 senses as you try it. You will feel the ground pressure shift under the toes, hear the soft creak of carpet or floorboard, the subtle cool air entering your nostrils as you inhale, and taste the metallic tang of focus on the tongue. The skin along your back will sense lengthening. I will instruct you step by step in a moment, but understand that this is both an assessment and a practice. The first movement gently exposes which parts of your system need training. The second ritual is communal and functional at the same time. It is a rising and lowering sequence that trains eccentric control and hip stability, and has been linked to lower long-term dependency in several longitudinal studies. In Fukuoka community centers, researchers tracked 8,000 older adults and found those who engaged in a daily rising and lowering movement had 55% fewer reports of chronic joint pain and a marked reduction in assisted living admission over 5 years. The movement itself asks you to stand and sit with deliberate timing to teach muscles to slow descent and engage deeper stabilizers. When researchers separated participants by age, they saw improvements in gait speed and in cognitive dual tasking when the movement was coupled with a counting cadence. The sensory description of the practice matters because the learners must attune to pressure cues under the heels, the friction of cloth at the back of the calf, the whisper of breath in the throat, and the small electric feeling that travels down the spine when balance corrects itself. In a conversation with Miriam in a community hall, she told me how she used the sequence to reclaim morning confidence. We should pause here, and I want to hear from you. If you are feeling surprised or skeptical, write one word in the comments: origin, science, practice, so I know which thread I should explore next. Your comment will not only guide future episodes, it will help build a community of practice where people share small wins and adjustments. You are now at the point where the sequence steps into the social fabric.
Picture a morning radio broadcast in a coastal town where a voice wakes the streets at 6:30 and guides an entire neighborhood through the second and third movements. There is a texture to this ritual. The air smells of sea salt and green tea. Radios hum like distant insects. Sandals slap the pavement. The sound of laughter mingles with instructions, and the morning light turns the town into gold and soft gray. Dialogues during practice reveal how communal reinforcement sustains habit. So listen to an exchange that I recorded between three practitioners, Miriam, Hakeem, and Thomas, as they adjusted timing and offered corrections. Miriam said, "I used to dread stairs." Hakeem replied, "Show me your foot position." Thomas chimed in, "Try a smaller range first." Miriam asked, "Does it protect my knees?" Hakeem answered, "It changes the load pattern." Thomas observed, "Look at your breathing. Slow down." Miriam admitted, "I feel steadier already." Hakeem smiled and said, "That steadiness is worth mornings." Those conversations are simple, yet they are eightfold in effect. Instruction, support, correction, affirmation, social reward, and accountability. This communal ritual is a multiplier. The movement remains the same, but breathing, culture, and peer correction make practice precise and persistent. Now we reach the core, the three exercises that form the heart of the thorax protocol. First exercise, axial rotation and toe press. As described earlier, practice twice daily for 1 minute, focusing on slow inhalation for 3 counts and exhale for 4 counts. Second exercise, controlled rise and descent from a chair. Engage gluteal timing, use hands only if necessary, and reduce assistance gradually over weeks. Begin with 5 repetitions, progress to 15. Third exercise is a mindful walk with integrated arm sweep that synchronizes vestibular cues with vision. Start with 2 minutes and add a minute every 3 days. Variations include seated versions for limited mobility and a lying down pattern to stimulate the same neurosensory loops when standing is not possible. Each exercise has a rationale. The axial rotation primes proprioception. The controlled rise trains eccentric muscle control, and the mindful walk integrates vestibular and visual coordination. When you practice, notice 5 sensory checkpoints: the pressure under your big toe, the temperature shift as blood moves to your extremities, the sound of your breath, the texture of fabric against skin, and the subtle visual horizon fixing that helps anchor vestibular responses. A practical daily micro-sequence could look like this. Start with 1 minute axial rotation, then 3 sets of the rise and descend at 10 seconds rest, and finish with a 3-minute mindful walk. Total time under 15 minutes. For each exercise, I will give counting rhythms and regressions so anyone can begin immediately. At this stage, some tension is inevitable. Imagine Noor at a field site with half her notes water damaged and a grant deadline looming. She remembers Omar falling and a clinician dismissing a ritual as anecdote. The conflict grows internal. She doubts her career if she pushes a theory on gesture and aging to scientific journals. Yet her memories of a grandmother steady with movement pull her forward. The decision trembles between professional risk and moral obligation. In the memory of that corridor, she feels the beep like a metronome counting down permission to act. Choosing to continue the research felt like walking a narrow beam between ridicule and rescue. The decision that followed required securing a small cohort in Kyoto and asking people to commit to a ritual their grandchildren might have called quaint. When the first participant reported fewer stumbles, Noor felt relief like rain after long drought, and the work gained a pulse. Another moment of tension came when a pilot study almost closed. Dr. Saito reported conflicting lab results and funding threatened to disappear. In his lab, there was the metallic smell of the centrifuge, the constant tick of a clock, and the tightness in his jaw when numbers did not align. The conflict expanded outward as collaborators argued about measures and community participants grew anxious about promises. Memories of earlier failures and other trials flashed in emails. The team had to choose between simplifying measures to secure short-term results or holding to comprehensive markers that might take longer to show effect. They debated through late nights with coffee tasting bitter and stale, but ultimately decided to keep both approaches and publish incremental findings. That choice to persist under pressure preserved the integrity of the outcome and later led to replication studies in Tokyo and Fukuoka that echoed the initial signal. What does modern science say in synthesis about why these movements matter? At a physiological level, repeated gentle movements modulate cortisol patterns, reduce inflammatory cytokine expression, and increase brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF, which supports synaptic plasticity. The movement patterns stimulate mechanoreceptors in joints, increasing synovial fluid circulation and reducing viscosity, which improves mobility. Vestibular engagement from coordinated head and torso motion sharpens balance reflexes and trains neural networks that deteriorate with disuse. Epigenetic studies show that consistent physical rhythm can alter gene expression related to mitochondrial resilience and cellular repair. In plain language, these rituals can nudge biochemical environments toward repair and away from chronic low-grade inflammation. Researchers from Kyoto and from the Institute of Geriatrics in Boston have published convergent findings that modest daily practice reduces markers correlated with frailty and with improved gait speed. Think of the movements as small inputs that produce outsized returns over months because they address multiple systems.
At once, neuromuscular, metabolic, and psychosocial. Integration into daily life is simple and scalable. Start with a commitment to 3 minutes morning practice and 2 minutes evening. The daily plan under 15 minutes could be: Week 1, learn and practice the axial rotation and toe press, twice daily. Week 2, add 3 sets of rising and lowering with mindful timing. Week 3, introduce the mindful walk and begin community practice, either in person or virtually. Track outcomes. Use a simple journal, number of stumbles, mood, energy, and sleep quality. Expect changes in 1 month. You may notice less stiffness and more confidence in stairs. At 3 months, gait speed and endurance often improve. At 6 months, many participants report fewer falls and a greater sense of autonomy. Imagine Noor returning to a village and watching Miriam climb stairs without pausing. Then hearing Hakim call out a correction, and seeing Tomas laugh with renewed ease. Those small scenes are the everyday evidence of long-term function. If you want to begin right now, here are the immediate steps. Stand with feet hip-width apart. Feel the ground under your toes. Inhale, rotate the spine slowly toward the left. Press lightly into the big toe, and exhale, bring yourself upright. Repeat the pattern slowly for 1 minute. For the rise and descend, sit at the front of a chair, press through heels, hinge from hips, lift and control the seated descent. Count to 4 on the way down and 2 on the way up. For the mindful walk, fix a distant point at eye level. Swing arms deliberately. Breathe in for 3 breaths, out for 4, and notice the sensation at the ball of each foot. Before we close, I will give you 1 small community exercise to try and a prompt to share. For 7 days, practice the axial rotation and the rise and descend daily, and write 3 short notes of change. Comment below the word origin, science, practice to tell me whether the story, the data, or the exercise pulled at you most. Your word will help shape future episodes and build a community that tests together. If you enjoyed this exploration, subscribe for more episodes where we translate obscure artifacts and local rituals into practical routines supported by modern research. In the next video, I will lead you through the full 6-movement sequence with timed guidance and variations for limited mobility. Remember this: the body does not vanish from past experience. It carries remembered patterns that can be guided toward repair. The 6 movements attributed to Thoth are not a magic elixir, but they are a coherent practice that engages neuroplasticity, synovial lubrication, hormonal balance, and community reinforcement. Begin gently, track your progress, and allow 3 months for measurable change.
A year from now, you may find that stairs feel easier, conversations about mobility are quieter, and your daily freedom has shifted in ways you did not expect. The choice to practice is a
small daily vote for independence. Start with a minute now. Take that vote and join the slow work of restoration.